Hey, today we're going to talk about histology. Histology is the study of tissues, and a tissue is just going to be a group of cells that look alike to do a specific function. And so all these cells are going to be really similar, all trying to do a similar job. And we break our tissues down in the adult human body into 4 groups. We're going to go over these 4 groups. You have your nervous tissue, your muscle tissue, your connective tissue, and then finally your epithelial tissue. When we're talking about our nervous tissue, we're talking about that tissue that is important in transmitting those electrical impulses that allow you to react to different types of stimuli, right? It also allows you to integrate those stimuli and carry out some sort of action against it. Your nervous tissue is going to be contained within your nervous system. And if you look over here, you can see the majority of your nervous system with your brain, spinal cord, and then these spinal nerves coming out. We have 2 major types of cells that we find in the nervous system, and we'll go into more depth into these types of cells at the end of the semester when we talk about the nervous system. But they are your neurons and your neuroglial cells. The neurons, these are going to be the stars of the show, okay? They're the cell that is transmitting whatever that signal is, right? So they're the ones sending that electrical signal. And they make up some of the longest cells in the body. If you think of your sciatic nerve, that's a nerve that runs from the lumbar region in the back all the way down the leg. And so this cell can be up to 3 feet long. It can be a really long cell. Your neurons aren't very good at repairing themselves, especially in the central nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system, you have some neuroglial cells that help with that. But really in the central nervous system, they're not very good at repair. When we look at a neuron, we can break it down into 3 major parts. You're going to have the soma, or the body of the neuron. So if you look here, if you look over here at this one, this would be the soma. Here you can see the nucleus in the soma. And then your neuron's going to have dendrites. Dendrites are like branches coming off of your neuron. And so if you look at this, you can see some of these little skinny branches coming off of this neuron. This is what the neuron uses to talk with other neurons. So it's the one where they bring in the information. And then they send out that information using the axon. Your neuron can have a ton of dendrites, but it only has 1 axon, okay? That axon can branch later, but you start out with just 1. And when we get to the nervous tissue and our nervous system, it will make more sense why you only have 1 axon, and we'll talk about the axon hillock and why that's important. The hillock is going to be this area right in front of the axon. So, neurons are going to have a soma, they're going to have the body. They can have a lot of dendrites, but they're only going to have 1 axon. Your neurons can come in a bunch of different shapes. So if we look right here, you can see 3 different shapes. You have your bipolar neuron. So if you look at this, you have the dendrites up here, or the receiving area, and then that information will flow through the soma and then out the axon. Here you can see that axon has multiple branches, but you only start out with 1 axon, and then it can have multiple branches. And then you get to your multipolar. This is going to be the most common one that you find in the central nervous system. And here you can see all these dendrites where that receiving edge comes into the soma and then out the axon. And then lastly, over here is a pseudo-unipolar neuron. We say pseudo-unipolar because it's not actually unipolar. You do see that you have a soma here, so it's not like a direct one, but it's pretty direct, where you have your dendrites and almost a direct attachment to that axon. So those are the neurons. 3 major parts: soma, dendrites, axons. Can come in a couple different shapes: bipolar, multipolar, pseudo-unipolar. And they are the ones that are sending the signal. They are the stars of the show. And like any good star, they have an entourage. And for our neurons, the entourage are going to be these neuroglial cells. These are the supporting cells. These are the cells that have to help the neuron pick out its shoes, what clothes to wear, cook its food, sort of. So if you look over here, they are going to be those supporting cells. They help to frame the neural tissue, so they allow those neurons to be at the right length. If they're too close, they're not going to be able to synapse properly. If they're too far, they're not going to be able to synapse properly. And so these neuroglials position them where they're at the right distance so they can send their signals. They also provide nutrients for the neurons, especially these astrocytes. So when you get up into the central nervous system, you have a thing called the blood-brain barrier. These capillaries are like super tight and they don't let a lot of stuff out. But astrocytes can hook on to those capillaries and pull out nutrients so it can give it to neurons. For now, I don't want you to know the different types of neuroglial cells. We'll go more into detail on that when we get to the nervous system. Just know that there are a lot of different types of neuroglials and they all do kind of different jobs. So for the nervous tissue, 2 types of cells: neurons, neuroglials. Know the different parts of a neuron, the different types of neuron, and just know that there are various neuroglials. And, you know, since that neuron is the star of the show, and these neuroglials are going to be more like that entourage, how many people are in a star's entourage? A lot. And when we look at nervous tissue, we see that there are a lot more neuroglial cells than there are neurons. So here is our neuron, and all these other little dots out here, these are all the neuroglial cells. And so there's a bunch of neuroglial for each neuron. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is muscle. We've already kind of covered muscle. You just took a test over muscle, so this should be really fresh on your mind. Muscle's number 1 job is to constrict. It's used for movement, right? It doesn't matter if it's cardiac, smooth, or skeletal. It's all about moving. And you can find muscle in a lot of different places. One is it's attached to bone if it's skeletal muscle. If it's smooth muscle, you're going to find it in the hollow organs. And if it's cardiac, it's going to be in the heart. So when we look at our skeletal muscle, if you remember, it is large. It's a very long fiber. It has more than one nucleus. Here you can see the nuclei in this picture. It is voluntary, so you have to consciously constrict that muscle or contract that muscle. It has the striation, so it has that banding pattern, and it allows for movement. Skeletal muscle can repair itself. It's not great at it, but it's possible. So if you have like a muscle tear, it can fix itself. So this is your skeletal muscle in a longitudinal section. This is your skeletal muscle in a cross section. So you're taking those fibers that are running like this, and we're chopping them here and looking at them head on. And how can you tell skeletal muscle cut like this? How can you still figure out that that's skeletal muscle? Well, one, you can see that you have these groups of muscles, so these fascicles, right? There's a nice gap around them because they also have that endomysium. And if you look too, you can see that there are more than one nucleus on each one of these bundles. And so if you see that there's more than one nucleus on a cell, that's going to tell you directly that that's skeletal muscle. You do not have a lot of multinucleated cells in your body. So if you see that, you should think skeletal muscle. So again, what does your skeletal muscle do? It helps you move your head, trunk, limbs, basically your entire body. It's also important in writing, talking, singing, chewing, swallowing, breathing, lots of different things that your skeletal muscle does. And here again, you can see those striations really well, more than one nucleus on the cell. And with your skeletal muscle, it's so packed with those myofilaments that it pushes those nuclei out to the edges of the cell. And so you can see how this nuclei is kind of squished here as it gets pushed out to the edge of the cell. That's another good idea or hint that you're looking at skeletal muscle, is that those nuclei are pushed out to the edge of the cell. The next one is going to be smooth muscle. If you look at it, there are no striations here, no bandings. You can see this muscle cell right here. It's mononucleated, so only one nucleus per muscle cell. You're going to find this lining hollow organs, including your blood vessels. So where do you have hollow organs? Mostly in your gastrointestinal tract. So with your digestive tract, you're going to find hollow organs like the stomach, the large and small intestines. We also find your ureters, so the things that take urine from the kidneys down to the bladder. The bladder is also going to have some smooth muscle. So basically anything that's hollow that needs to contract, you're going to find smooth muscle. It's pretty good at repairing itself after injury, and its job is to move stuff through the digestive tract, constrict your blood vessels, and empty the bladder. So when you're looking at smooth muscle, again, one nucleus per cell. These cells are kind of spindle shaped, and so they're kind of thicker in the middle and then taper off at the ends, as you can see right here in this one. When you're doing histology, we're going to look at a bunch of different types of tissues. And for me, at least, one of the hard tissues to tell apart is going to be smooth muscle and dense regular connective tissue. If you look at them, they're kind of similar. Difference is that the nuclei in this tissue are going to be really far spaced out, instead of with your smooth muscle you have every single cell having one. You don't see that in connective tissue. There's a lot of this stuff called the extracellular matrix. Extra, like extraterrestrial, right? Like outside of. And so there's a lot of this stuff that is outside of the cell that helps to make up this tissue. And we'll talk more about that when we get to connective tissue. But let's finish up muscle with cardiac muscle. You're only going to find cardiac muscle in the heart. It is involuntary, so you can't control it. Mononucleated, it has striations. So if you look, you can still see that banding pattern here. But it also has these intercalated discs that are a special type of gap junction. So it allows this electrical activity from this cell to directly transmit to this cell. The heart is pretty terrible at repairing itself after damage. So if you have a heart attack, that part is going to die. So if we look at it this way, these cells are also branched. So you can see how it's branched right here. Those intercalated discs between the cells. This right here, that's actually a blood vessel, because your cardiac muscle really needs a lot of blood, a lot of oxygen to continually pump. So it has a good blood supply. All right, so our three types of muscle: skeletal, cardiac, smooth. Make sure to know which ones are voluntary, involuntary, striated, non-striated, multinucleated, mononucleated. And we will pick up with connective tissue next time.